So I'm going to invite my friends to come up. Today we're wrapping up Daniel, the book of Daniel in chapter 12. And as they come up, we're just going to do a really quick recap. So this summer we've been journeying through the book of Daniel. We've felt some deep emotions. We've had some laughs. We've looked and struggled with prophecy. And today we are wrapping up this book. And I want you to know, as kind of a disclaimer, right? We are not, me and my friends up here, we're not here to give you all the answers. Sometimes we look at the people sitting up front with the microphone as they're the ones with the answers. All we are people who love Jesus and are journeying in our walk with him and want to share with you what we know so far. And so our encouragement to you is if there's a space of tension that you feel while listening to us, that come talk to us, engage with us, but also let that be motivation to push you to ask those questions to God and dig deeper into your relationship with God, deeper into the spaces of complexity. So I am going to grab a seat, and I'm going to have my friends introduce themselves. We're going to start at the end, the gentleman on the end, and we're going to work our way this way. So introduce yourself, and we'll keep moving.
Greetings, friends. Check 1, 2, 3, 4. Hello, all. Some of you know me, perhaps. My name is Tony, and I get to hang around here, sometimes play bad notes on the keys. And, an honor to be here with you.
Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's awake by this point in the day. My name is Sonia, and I've been part of the creative team at One Place, and I'm excited to dive into Daniel 12. There's a lot of gems.
Hey guys, I come in every now and then, but my name is Krista. I'm a student in the seminary, so this will be my second year, and I just love studying, so that's a little tidbit about me. I'm excited.
I'm Kayla. Hello again. Go ahead.
I'm Zach. Hi.
Hi, Zach.
Okay, so friends, Tony, Sonia, Krista, and Zach.
Wait, were we supposed to say who we are, where we're from, what's our favorite chocolate?
No, just your name, so that they can know who it is that's speaking to them.
Okay,
so
good.
you guys did a phenomenal job. They did a phenomenal job, right, guys? Did a phenomenal.
Mercy, we did the most. Zach actually really paid attention and didn't know what was
Yeah, it was great. All of you are great. So y'all, we've been journeying through Daniel, and today's the finale, right? We made it to the end of the book of Daniel, and you all have the amazing opportunity to share with them some of the things that you've studied. So we're gonna just dive right in. So as you've read through the book of Daniel, more specifically Daniel chapter 12, talk to me about some of the things you observe happening in this last chapter of this awesome book. Anyone can go first.
Yeah, I think as I was kind of reading throughout, it's a unique way to end, because I'm not good with numbers. And so I was just really going through Daniel 12, and I was like, man, I was really wishing there'd be no numbers here. But there's numbers. So I'm like, you got to do things with the numbers, and the numbers get complicated. But one thing that I just noticed this pattern of is, I guess the observation I made is it's interesting because it's kind of referring to some instances of the time of the end. And in some ways it's it's almost like ending on a hopeful note throughout the chapter. I think as we're about to see kind of as we go through this conversation, there's even things that I found comforting because not even Daniel understood everything that was being disclosed to them. I was like, that feels so good. It's like when you're sitting in class and you're looking around, does anybody else get what's going on?
Right.
And I take so much comfort when other people are like, I have no clue what's going on. I'm like, that's amazing. So I'm like, me too. So I kind of feel like it's there with Daniel as well. Daniel doesn't fully get everything that's going on. And even one of the beings clothed in linen, whoever they are, one of them has some questions too. So I don't know. It's almost like God's trying to, wrap things up here and leave them with hope, but also there's some questions that are still kind of left throughout the chapter.
And lingering. Awesome. Thanks, Zach.
Yeah, I just want to comment and say Romans chapter 12 was kind of interesting for me because, guys, lately I've been in the New Testament. I'm in Romans right now, so that's a good book, 12 out of 10. Would recommend. So when Kayla was like, hey, we're studying, we're looking at Romans chapter 12, I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. So I went back and I read it, and I'm like, okay, this is cool. Wait, what? And so then I went back and I read it again, and I was like, I literally just read it 5 minutes ago. How do I find something new in the 5 minutes that just passed? So it's interesting because Romans chapter 12, this chapter specifically, it's rich enough to where you can keep reading and keep reading and keep reading and still find something new. But that's what the Bible in general. But anyways, yeah, that's what I was surprised what was going on in this chapter.
Yeah, so I think just like reading it, 5 or 6 times, I agree with Krista and what she was saying. And I think there was like 2 themes that I found. Number 1 was strange days indeed. And then the other part was get some rest. So those were some themes that I saw. What I mean by like strange days is that, the angel's talking about times of tribulation, time of trouble. But then Michael, Christ, is saying, I'm going to be with you.
Yeah.
I'm going to deliver you. So it's like we have this promise that we can claim that somewhat connects to, covenant promise. And then as well as towards the end, the angel says, get some rest. And I don't know about for anyone else in here, but I love that idea of like someone saying, get some rest. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, that bars. Because sometimes we need that reminder, right? Like the tension between those 2 themes. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Wow, yeah, so many good thoughts. I think for me, I'll just be honest, I'm a seminary boy, I'm a pastor. I try and avoid Daniel like the plague.
That's real.
It's just, it's tough to understand, and a lot of people I think a lot of us get wrapped up in it. I know I certainly have, and there's a lot going on. I think as I read this, it was a good invitation for me as someone who has avoided it so much. Even as a pastor, I'm like, oh man, I gotta actually read this. And like dive in and let it speak to me. I realized, wow, this actually has things to say to me. And we can get into more of that later, but 2 things I did note. The first is that I feel like all apocalyptic literature sort of reads kind of like a high fantasy novel. I'm a big fan of like fantasy fiction. So, like I'm a Lord of the Rings fan, Chronicles of Narnia, etc. Any of you excited for the new Amazon Lord of the Rings show? Okay, we have a few. I'm a little hesitant. I'm a little worried, but let's talk about that later. If you do care about it, please talk to me about it later. I'm very nerdy about it. Some of this reads kind of like Lord of the Rings or like fantasy fiction, like Daniel's looking and there's 2 others on the bank of this stream and there's a man clothed in linen and then he's saying cryptic words and, you can almost imagine that it's in Elvish or something. So to me, that's kind of what the picture that it painted for me was this very fantastical things that was like, man, what does that mean? But then at the end, the thing that really stood out to me is when the word comes in verse 12, blessed is he who waits and arrives at the 1335 days. Blessed is he who waits. And I was thinking, wow, isn't that part of like intrinsically what it means to be Jesus follower and a Christian in the world? Like, blessed is he who waits. Man, we're all kind of waiting on something, on God to do a thing, perhaps. So that's what stood out to me.
No, all of those points really hit. And Tony, I resonated with what you said, right, about how sometimes when we look at Daniel as a person who is empowered to preach the gospel, sometimes it's like, ooh, maybe not this one, right? So as you dove in, right, from a place of being honest and transparent, because I feel like the gospel is most powerful when we're transparent. Talk to us about what portions of the chapter sparked concern inside of you. What portions of the chapter kind of like rubbed you the wrong way? And if so, how did you come to terms with that, if at all, right? Because sometimes we don't walk away with resolution. So it's a 2-sided question. What portion of the chapter rubbed you the wrong way or sparked concern? And did you walk away with resolution? And if so, what?
I guess I can dive in first. So when I was looking at verse 8, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. I'll read. It says, "And I heard, but I did not understand. So I asked," and this is Daniel speaking, "My Lord, what will be the outcome of all this?" So, Daniel's asking questions. He's wondering what is going on, what's about to happen in the future. And then the angel replied, "Go your way." And then later it says, "Many will be purified, but the wicked will continue to be wicked. None of the wicked will understand, but the wise will understand." And so just the idea that the wicked will continue to be wicked, I'm thinking of kind of like last days, I know this has been going on for a while as well, but it kind of scares me a little bit, like the wicked will continue to be wicked. But then at the same time, I'm reminded of the promise that God will deliver, Michael, Christ, he will fight for us. And so, I think just like not knowing what the wicked are up to, it's a little bit scary to think about, but at the same time, if we're faced with fear, God can reveal his greater power.
Yeah, I love the fact that the chapter starts with Michael standing up, right? So that's the background, but I resonate with that, right? That concern of like, not everyone comes under the obedience or chooses to be under the obedience of Christ. And sometimes that creates dangerous situations. I resonate with that, thank you.
I think I also gravitated towards that passage. It's just sort of an interesting word. I think, like for me, I have this idea in my head, like God wants to save all people, and all people are welcome. That there's this heart that God has a heart for all people to be saved. But this sort of, to say, some shall be purified, but the wicked will act wickedly, and none of the wicked will understand. That's kind of interesting. It's almost God's just saying like they're not going to understand. Like there's not even going to be a chance for them to understand. And to me, I was like, man, God, that's tough for me. And it kind of echoes something that Jesus says too in the Gospels. I'm thinking like Matthew 13, I believe, where he talks about, man, those who have ears, let them hear. And not everyone has ears to hear. And I was like, I was pondering that. I was like, man, that's sort of a tough word. Like some people simply either can't hear or they won't understand. And why is that? And why can't God break through that in order to save them? And that's sort of difficult, I think, for me.
I want to piggyback on that because, like that, it did bring me a little bit of concern because, man, I've sat through, like this summer, I sat through Hebrew 2 with Dr. Glons, and everyone around me seems to be getting it, and I'm sitting there like, why don't I understand it? Is there something wrong with me? So it makes me feel, okay, is my lack of ability to understand this thing reflective of something that's going on with me? And so, but then I try to take a little bit of comfort because I'm like, not even Daniel understands this thing. So I wonder if there's something there. And you just kind of brought up, I believe it's in Matthew 13, where the disciples go to Jesus and they're like, Jesus, why do you speak to everybody in parables? And he says, hearing they don't hear and seeing they don't see lest they turn.
He says, I do it so they won't understand.
So they won't understand.
Which is wild.
And the disciples like, wow, yeah. And then Jesus tells another parable. And at the end of that parable, they go, so can you please explain that parable to us? Because we don't even get it. Right. So I thought it was really interesting. Like Jesus is explaining things in parables so that way, it seems like maybe people won't understand it. But even the disciples are like, we don't get it. So I guess where I take a little bit of solace there is the difference with I think the commonality with Daniel and the disciples is that they were asking the questions. Right. I think they were seeking, they were picking at it. Whereas the rest just kind of maybe like you're sitting through class and you just glaze over it and you're like, I don't get it, moving on from it. Those who are genuinely concerned are asking questions in order to garner understanding of it because, Daniel walks away and, you kind of pointed out, Sonia, that at the end, God's like, don't worry about it. Go to rest. You'll wake up in abundance. And then it's like, okay, I guess I don't need to worry about this for the final. We're good. That's on you guys. That's someone else. That's next. That's Hebrew 3. So I don't know. I thought that was a really good point that you brought up because it did concern me too. I'm like, so then if I do understand this, am I good? Am I righteous? And how many people might even understand this, because we talk about how the devil must know scripture so well. Does he even understand this? And so does an understanding of it then, and I think how much I'm going off rabbit trail here.
Please do.
How much in Adventism do we think like we have so much information, and does that information constitute righteousness?
Mercy.
Is that the same knowing that we're seeking, or is this understanding like something genuine? I genuinely want to understand this thing because I care about you, God, and I want to know more about you. So if you're saying I don't need to know it, then I'm not going to worry about it. But if there's something worthy of me, like noteworthy of this, then maybe I'm going to ask these questions. So.
Yeah. Oh man, Zach, everybody, you guys, I just want to hop on this real quick. So I love how you guys are talking about like why won't the wicked like understand? If you also look at the verse where it says, there will be multitudes who sleep, those who are wise. Oh, but you, Daniel, roll up and seal the words of the scroll until the time of the end. So why does he have to wait till the time of the end? Like, if you're anything like me, right? I like to know things now. Like, okay, give it to me now, give it to me now, give it to me now. Why can't I? Like, I want to understand this stuff now. I'm going off on a tangent, but it's coming back.
We're
Okay?
with you. We're with you. Go.
Just stick with me.
We're with you. We're with you.
Okay, so I'm 23 years old. I've been a Christian in name for 23 years, right? I accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior 5 years ago when I was 18, and I just understood the depth and the graciousness of the gospel last Sabbath.
Wow.
Take that in mind. And when I finally grasped and understood the beautiful, gorgeous graciousness of the gospel, I wasn't frustrated and upset that it took me 23 years of my life to finally get it. And the reason why is because I'm like, God, I surrender to you, and I know that what you have been doing in my life up until this point led me to this revelation at this point. In other words, what I'm saying is don't be frustrated and don't get upset if you don't understand something now. If you're not grasping a concept now.
Yeah.
Because we have the faith and the hope knowing that Christ is the author and the finisher of our faith. He is the definition of truth, right? So if he is the way, the truth, and the life, and he says that, then that is a promise that we can have faith on, that he is going to lead us to all truth.
Yeah.
So even though like when he's telling Daniel to roll up and seal the words until the end, we need to be okay with that. We need to be okay and say, you know what, God, you're sovereign. You're going to lead us to that truth when you lead us to that truth.
Yeah.
And ask the questions. Keep seeking, keep searching, because eventually he's going to reveal it to you. So I just wanted to hop on that. I thought that was good.
That's dope. And I was reading through as you guys were talking. In verse 10, right before it talks about the wicked not understanding, it says, many will be purified, made spotless, and refined. But, which shows us that the wicked are not doing this, but the wicked will continue, right? Like all of those words, purified, made spotless, and refined, speaks to a process. Right? So is it possible that the wicked will not understand because they're not willing to submit to the process?
Mercy, mercy, mercy.
Right? That sometimes understanding means that I will be in spaces where God will need to show himself to me in ways that will like, ooh, God, you need to refine that out of me. Yeah. Right? That there's this thing that I'm refusing to let go of. And he's like, hey, I need you to let go of this so you can see me in this new way. And maybe the wicked will not understand because they refuse to surrender to the process. Right? And so maybe in the spaces of discomfort, right? Of like, God, I'm frustrated, right? With this and coming to a place of surrender of like, no, God, you are the finisher of my faith, right? That he that began a good work will complete it, bring it to completion, right? And so I love these spaces of tension and concern because they push us to see God in new ways and to surrender to him in ways that we would not have at the beginning of the 23 years, right? I love that. I love that. So that was one place of tension. Any other places of tension or concern that you guys found while going through this chapter?
Yeah, I think I resonated with what Zach said earlier. I think, I'm an Adventist boy through and through, 4th generation. My dad's a pastor. I went to not only Pathfinders, but also Adventurers. I was a busy bee.
Let's go.
So, Pathfinder clout.
That was good.
Pathfinder strong.
Pathfinder strong, exactly. Walk softly in the sanctuary.
Song in my heart.
Keep a song in my heart every day.
Go
See,
on,
Sonia
God,
knows too. And maybe some of you guys resonate with that. And I think when you grow up in this thing, in this family, in this religious space, you get a sense, I think, growing up, like, oh man, like these things are important to us, to our family consciousness. Daniel, Revelation, apocalyptic literature. And as you understand Adventist history, you understand, oh yeah, these things have been historically important to us. But I think what I have felt throughout so many years is, man, there does seem to be a pull and this magnetism for us to think, oh yeah, there's righteousness by intellect, righteousness by knowledge, that we can kind of get salvation by knowing the right answers to things. And this chapter seems to just fly in the face of that. It's typical God. It's just typical, it's so consistent with who Jesus is too in the Gospels, the way that this happens. When, like in verse 8, it's like, I heard, but I did not understand. And then I said, oh my Lord, what shall be the outcome? And God's like, go your way, Daniel. Just go on, go your way. For these words are shut up and sealed until the time of the end. And it's just like such a non-answer. It's typical Jesus, when people come to him, they're like, Jesus, like, give me the answer to this thing. And he's like, well, here's a story. Or like with the woman at the well, and she's like, which mountain should we worship at? And he's like, go get your husband. He's like, he's not always interested in like just giving answers. He's almost more interested in the process, the questions, the conversation, the relationship. And this seems to be so consistent with who God is. Daniel is like, I don't even know. And it almost seems like in the asking, I think this is what kind of brought comfort to me, is that I want to come to the text to say, God, give me the answer to this thing. And God's like, no. I want you to ask. And there's something strong in that like, oh, that God is someone I could come to ask with my uncertainty. And he's like, well, I'm not going to tell you, because you don't need to know. Sorry. But there's something strong about asking, and I keep coming back to the blessed is he who waits. Yeah. And I think that gives me a lot of comfort, that there's a blessing in the waiting, in the unanswers, in the not knowing. And God's like, maybe it's actually a gift to you not to know. If you knew, it would be worse for you. I don't know. That's just my pondering.
Yeah, I love that, because it's also really cool to see God include Daniel in this process, even though he doesn't understand. Yeah. Like, it's like, I'm not going to exclude you because you don't understand. I'm going to include you in it, and don't worry about it. I just want you to be a part of it. And I think of like growing up with my siblings and my little brother, like, he just wants to play the video game with me that he has no knowledge of what it is or how to even play it, but I give him a mic that's not even like connected to the game, or a controller that's not even connected to the game, and homeboy's going crazy. Like, yeah, I'm like, dude, that's you, and he doesn't even know, but he just wants to be a part of the process. He just wants to be a part of the experience, and I think it's really cool that God does that with Daniel. He's like including him in this like global world events, giving him a seat at the table, and it's just like, don't worry about it. But you can ask questions. Like, I want you to ask questions. I want you to be a part of this, but you don't have to worry about it. It's part of the process. It's part of like being a part of it. It's part of, maybe you won't understand it, and that's okay, but at least you're a part of it. At least you're, I think of the woman who says, like, Lord, even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table. Like, we just want to be a part of whatever it is that's going on if I don't understand it. And I think it's a part of the process of growing.
And I feel like oh man, I'm talking too much.
No, you're not.
I feel like it makes me think of my dad a little. When I was young, my family was kind of in and out of homelessness for a time. And I remember from time to time, my dad would bring us into the living room when we still had our house, and he would say, we're going to pray because we have no food. And God answers prayers, so we're going to pray. And so we would gather together in the living room, we would pray. And then crazy miracle things would happen. We'd have beans show up on our door with, anonymous like money in the mail from who knows where. But God really took care of us during that time. But what I didn't know was kind of behind the scenes. My dad invited us to pray in the living room. I was maybe 7, 8 years old, and my dad kind of included us in that. But then like out of my vision, I didn't even know my dad was hustling. He was like trying to make money. He was washing clothes for people. He was, working nights like all night. I had no idea he was doing all these things like in the background, trying to work on my behalf. But he never let me in on those things as an 8-year-old, because as an 8-year-old I couldn't carry that. I couldn't bear the weight of that. And so he carried that for me. And it was not until later on that when as an adult, when we talked about it, he revealed those things. And it just made me think about how hard that he had worked at that time. And I was just thinking, man, isn't that just like God, like to carry this stuff that is too heavy for us, and we're just like, God, I want to know. He's like, no, it's too heavy for you. It's too heavy for you. That's what this made me think of.
So that is a place of hope, right? So as you were reading Daniel, right, like everything in life, like our processes with Christ, there are the places of tension where he's pushing you to grow, and then there are the places of comfort and the places of reassurance. Following in the vein that Tony started us on, what are other places of hope that we find in this chapter?
Yeah, I think a big one for me that was at first glance a point of contention is this idea of like God waiting till I think it's verse 7, God waits till when the power of the holy people has finally been broken, then these things will be completed. Like, why do you wait to the worst possible occasion to then like wrap up everything? Like, why not stop it before it gets worse? And it just kind of is reminded, like, to me the idea was, I kind of, that verse in 2 Peter 3:8-10 comes to mind, which is like, the Lord is not slack concerning his promises, but is long-suffering towards us, not willing that any should perish, but all should come to repentance. So to me, it seems like God it almost like he allows the prolonging of the suffering of the saints in order to delay the destruction of the wicked. So same thing, he allowed Jesus to suffer for a specified period of time to provide an opportunity for others to be saved for, all time throughout eternity. So I think it's not that those who are at the end of times are suffering blindly. I think they're genuinely wanting to wait out as much as possible this opportunity for everybody to be saved. To allow that possibility for everybody. So I used to look at the book of Revelation, look at the end times, and be like, man, that sucks that the people have to suffer. It's like, well, I guess this is what you got to do. You got to suffer for Jesus. But I think it's more so just this aspect of like everyone's longing, waiting, holding out to the very last opportunity, for people to be a part of this.
Oh, man, Zach. Okay, I have something else to gotta go with what your question is, but I'm gonna hop off of what Zach was saying. So
Krista, did you just say, I'm not going to answer your question at all, I'm going to ignore it, I'm going to actually instead go over this?
No, what I said was, I'm hopping off of this tangent, and we're going to come back to the main point, which is off the tangents. So anyways, what I'm saying is, so the song 100 billion times, right? It's so good, we literally just sang it. And we know the passage where Jesus says, if you have 100 sheep and one goes off, wouldn't you leave the 99 to save the one?
Yeah.
A lot of times we look at this world that we live in and we're frustrated because there's so much sin, there's so much despair, there's so much destruction, but it's because Christ is waiting still for that one sheep to come back to the rest of the 99. He's going to wait as long as it takes for them to say, all right, yeah, I'm ready to come home. I'm ready to come back to you. Because that's just the loving Father. That's just the type of God that we have. That if you were the one, he would drop everything and wait for you to come back. That's just who he is. And that's just a blessing. So that was just to go off of what Zach was saying. It's beautiful when you think about it. But to kind of answer what Kayla's question was, one thing that really brought me hope was kind of like the first verse. The first verse. And it says, at that time, Michael, the great prince who protects your people, will arise. There will be a time of distress such as has not happened from the beginning of nations until then. But at that time, your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book, will be delivered. I was like, Lord Jesus, that's me. Like, I'm excited. Like, I cannot wait to be delivered because this world ain't it, fam. It ain't it. This isn't our home. This isn't the end. So hearing that, it just brought me so much joy and so much excitement that, oh my goodness, I'm about to be delivered by Christ himself. He's about to come through the sky, break it open, lift me up, and we're about to party for all of eternity. And I'm just super excited, so.
Love that.
Yeah, I think going off of Krista's excitement, I just love the idea of we can have this joy in Christ. We don't have to wait next year. We don't have to wait next week. we can have it here and now. And I don't know about you, but I'm waiting to give Jesus that in-person hug. You know, I'm done with the long distance, and yeah, I'm ready to hug Jesus. And so, yeah, to also answer Kayla's question, the verse where it says, it's part of Daniel 12, verse 3, it says, "Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens." And so you think of like those who live in the wisdom of God will shine bright. And these stars will shine bright forever and ever. That happens here and now.
Wow.
I think of the story of Moses when he meets God on the mountain and he comes back and his face is glowing. He is shining so much that the people are annoyed and they say like, "Oh, here's a veil, put it on your face." So I want you to ask yourself, like, are you spending that time with God that you are shining? People are asking you questions. Where do you have this peace? You don't necessarily have to say the word Jesus, but people will know that you have been in God's presence.
Yeah, that's good. Our relationship with him should be personal, not private. Right, that it should be something that is evident in how we handle conflict, and something that we in a way that we handle frustrations, in the way that we go through storms in our lives. That peace, that wisdom is always available, and it's transformative, and it's noticeable. Tony, I saw you pick up your mic.
You're seeing my half raised.
Just a little bit.
Okay, one more.
Okay.
Verse 2, I think it was maybe another source of hope for me. I think it's a classic God who is both, so it's a little difficult to read. Some who sleep in the dust shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to everlasting contempt, which is tough, you know. Oh, just a reminder, like, oh yeah, God is God. He's a God of love and justice too, which is tough, but I think I do see hope in that. And I think if you have ever, the promise of resurrection, I think, was kind of flowery language for me a lot of my Christian life until I lost someone to death. And now with a couple people, verses like this start to mean a little more, I think. And for any of you who have lost someone, a friend, parent, relative, man, so it starts to mean a little bit more. That those who sleep in the dust shall awake. It's a strong announcement. So I find hope in that as well.
So like I mentioned, we've been journeying through the book of Daniel, and sometimes it's easy to forget that this is an account of somebody's life, right? That there was a man named Daniel that lived, right? That was brutally ripped from his home, from the people who loved him, placed in a foreign country, in a foreign kingdom with a king who was a little bit unstable, right? Who lived through the transition of a bloody switch of power, right? That there was instability, not just in like his workplace, right? But like the ruler of his country got switched, right? A different way of ruling, right? He was thrown into a pit of lions, right? Like he lived a full life full of like he would need to, like today if that happened, he would need to sit down with some therapist for a very long time, right? Like he experienced high amounts of trauma. And for me, when I was reading through this, I just struggled because at the end of this autobiography / like this is what's gonna happen, there are two or three verses just for him, and that's it. And I struggled with that. So when I was processing through questions to give through the panelists, I wanted us to kind of sit with that and process through that. So the question is, how do we connect the last text or last few texts, so 12, 13 in Daniel at the end of his story? Is there a way that we can walk away with something or some hope that balances the pain of Daniel's life with those last few words? Where can we find resolution or hope in that contrast of a life given to God but filled with pain in those last few verses?
I just want to read part of that verse 13. It says, "As for you, go your way till the end. You will receive rest, and at the end of your days, you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance." So Daniel, I'm thinking he's older at this point in time, and he has received assurance of his salvation. And I was just thinking how affirming that would be. Like, you've gone through trauma, you've gone through the highs and lows, experienced joy, experienced sadness. Maybe he was up late crying, confused, and the angel has just told him, you have received salvation. You have this assurance. And I was thinking about this last night and just like going through the text, and this was before Jesus died on the cross. So for Daniel to have the faith that he is saved, he has received this assurance of salvation, that takes even more faith. And so for us today, we can boldly step into that throne room, like have that confidence, because Jesus has already died on the cross. We live in the here and now, and Jesus has done, he has bought us with his blood. We are his beloved. And so that's what really resonates with me, that Daniel has this assurance of salvation. And I think, Jesus last night, as I was reading this, he just spoke to me. He said, I have bought you with my blood. You are my beloved.
Yeah.
And then I just started singing it. I normally do not sing in my apartment, but my housemate was gone, so I'm just like singing.
Yeah.
And I'm just filled with this joy, this assurance.
That's good, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's huge because if Daniel was serving under various kings like King Nebuchadnezzar all throughout history, he's gone through it all. He's gone through being the guy who prayed outside his window 3 times a day and got persecuted for it and hated on for it, into the guy who was elevated to, different status and authority. And he's gone through the guy who was completely forgotten about by other kings and then brought back when they kind of just needed him again. He's gone through like all of it. So I think to get to the end of this book where God's telling him like more things that are going to happen or how things are going to be, then God gives him a personal message specifically just like for him. And I find that super special. It's like, on top of all these things, Daniel, I just want to let you know, as for you, you go your way, enter into your rest, and at the end of the days, you're going to receive your inheritance. Like, it's almost like that good done, well done, good and faithful servant.
Yeah.
You were faithful over little, I'm going to make you faithful over much.
Yeah.
So enter into the joy of your Lord. So it kind of seems like, it's almost like Daniel's ministry was not for nothing.
Yeah.
Like God's giving him that verbal confirmation. Like, even though you didn't understand everything, even though everything probably didn't make sense, even though you went through all these various different things, you're going to enter into your allotted inheritance.
And I think that's what kind of makes this whole Christian journey beautiful. We know at the end of the day, it's not going to be for nothing. Rather, it was just for that one person that God wanted you to minister to, or it was to a multitude of thousands. At the end of the day, you were put on this earth to bear the image of God so that someone else could revel in that truth of who God is. And so have faith and hope and know that this is not going to be for nothing. What we have gone through and what we will continue to go through as Christians, as people who have faith in God, it's not going to be for nothing.
I was talking with a good friend from Southern a couple days ago, and man, God's timing, it's crazy, because she was basically talking about having the assurance of salvation. And then I get a text from Kayla, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to read Daniel 12, not intimidating at all. So, God's timing is perfect. And as I was talking with my friend, I could just hear this joy and this like calmness in her voice. And she was explaining to me how, from when she was, 5 all the way to, 25, she had been just like searching after God. She studied religion and everything, she would preach sermons, all this, and it wasn't until a couple months ago that she finally started to believe what God said about her, that she is beloved, that, Jesus paid it all with his blood on the cross. And she was just telling me, she's like, Sonia, why did it take me so long to believe this about me? Why was it so hard to believe it? Like, what I know now, like, I wish I had known that at 10 years old, or what I believe now. And so I think just going off of that, like this promise, this assurance, it's for us today. And we can invite people to that, like into that experience, that assurance of salvation. And part of that is asking God, help my unbelief. Help me believe what you say about me.
Yeah, that's good. It's really good.
Why y'all looking at me? You guys are saying such beautiful things. I don't want to go in the opposite direction. You guys.
Keep it honest.
I don't know. I think the end of Daniel chapter 12 is interesting to me. I think I'm a verbal processor, so we're going to get there as we talk. Daniel had a really long life, and he went through some really tough things. Also some great things. I don't know. I think the way it ends, it's all very future tense. It's all very, blessed is he who waits. Go your way till the end. You will rest. It's all promises. And I think if you have experienced anything truly difficult in your life, which in a room this size, I know many of you probably have. Sometimes I don't really... Hearing another promise from God, I think sometimes can feel kind of empty. Like, oh man, you're like, blessed is he who waits once again, and like you'll rest one day, and you'll find it one day. I think that's tough. I think, and I think of Daniel, who had been through so many hard things, and at the end of this book, he's kind of just left with a promise, and I think as I read it, I'm like, man, Daniel, like, I want to be like you, because he doesn't even end it with his words, he ends it with God's words. And I feel like there's something strong in that, because if I were writing the book, I would write, blessed is he who waits, you shall rest. But for the rest of my days, I didn't have rest, and it was really hard every year, every day. And I lost people to death. And stuff was really tough still. Yeah. And even though I have this promise, it was like really... Like the truth that following God and being a Jesus follower like doesn't make your life automatically better. Jesus says in this world you will have trouble, that there will be suffering. So I think all this to say, this sounds really like a downer, but I think what I'm trying to get across is like, I want to be like Daniel, who ends the book with God's words instead of my own. Seems like to him there's something truer about the promise of rest than his present circumstance. Which I don't know if I'm there yet, but I would like to be there. I think that's really strong. I think I want to be like Daniel.
Yeah.
I don't know if that made sense, but...
It does. It does.
No, I think that's good. I really like that you said that. One thing that kind of stands out to me from what you just said is it's almost like he said you will rest, and I kind of wonder too if it's almost like a permission to rest. Like Daniel, you get to look over your career and it's almost like permission to do that, because Jeremiah 29 or 30 or 31. I don't know how many chapters Jeremiah has. But one of them, I know Jeremiah 29, we always claim that promise, but that Jeremiah 29:11, but that promise is in the midst of captivity.
Right.
Like, I'm sending you into captivity, which then constitutes not rest. Like, you are not entering in the land of Canaan, the promised land where you will rest. But it's interesting because then he says in Jeremiah 29, like, cultivate the land, till it, because in its peace you shall find peace. So it's almost like all throughout this process, it's like God's trying to give them permission to have that peace, to find that rest, to experience it now, and not just like in the future sometime. But yeah, I do see what you're saying. I think that's significant. You know, you read the end of the book of Job, and it's like Job gets resolution, but it's still lost his family.
Yeah.
Like, like that doesn't negate it. It's almost like all the eternal riches and the receiving of your inheritance is going to replace all of it. It's like, but that still happened. That doesn't negate all of it. So I wonder if it's like Daniel needed to hear that permission. Like you can actually have rest, of what I'm telling you. I don't know.
Perhaps the paradox of seems to be what you're getting at is this is almost in, again, typical God fashion, like the invitation into the paradox of God, the way of the kingdom, the upside down, up is down, down is up, the first is last, last is first. Almost that in the waiting itself is the rest.
Yeah. Yes.
In a sense.
Yeah, and I'm trying to hold on to the idea, like that you were saying, that this is not just a promise. Like,
Yeah.
you got this, buddy. Just keep believing. Like, good luck out there. Go get them. Good job, and turns them over. It's like, no, like, I do want you to have rest because I know everything you've been through too. And I think you not only, it's not that you had to earn this rest, but I just want to show you. There's this good book called, I don't even know if it's good. I'm not finished with it yet. But it's by Richard Rohr. I want to say Falling Backwards, but I'm pretty sure it's Falling Upwards. And he talks about, like, you know, during one of the wars, I'm forgetting, but how Japanese soldiers, when they were entering into retirement and they were finishing like all the service of the things that they've done, what they noticed about some of these soldiers is when they would leave retirement from being a soldier, they couldn't do anything but be a soldier. And so one of the ways they combated that was this initiation process by which when they finished their service, they would give them an adulterous amount of praise, like an unorderly amount of praise, to like just give them all the glory as much as possible. And then one of the things that they would say to them is, you've done your service for your country, now we need you to be there for your family and your community. So meaning whatever this was, that was good, but that's not this now, which is also necessary. So I just kind of wonder if that same thing, it's like God telling Daniel, like, you good and faithful servant, now you rest. Like, I know we keep calling you out of retirement. But yeah. So I kind of see it as that, like almost like not a negation of everything that's happened and not a promise that one day you're going to get it, but it's like you can have it even as you, wait for it, wait for the promise.
Yeah, and I think of going off of the word rest, it's kind of like God is inviting Daniel to rest in this salvation. And I think that's, you know, if we're going to come full circle, I think that's where faith steps in. Because it's like, you know, maybe we're going through hard times. You know, our feelings don't match up with our faith.
Yeah.
But thank goodness, like, Jesus is greater than our feelings.
Yeah.
And I think that's where faith has to step in. You know, you have to step into those waters like, okay, Jesus, or into the boat if it's rest. But, and, you know, you think of Jesus sleeping through the storm. He was able to rest because he knew who was in control. And so I think God is asking Daniel to step into that salvation and rest.
That's good. So our invitation to you all today is pretty simple, right? The reality is right now, right here, rest and assurance of your salvation is available. And it's not available because I said, like, right now it is, but it has been. Like, from the moment you opened your eyes this morning and took your first breath, that was God's gift inviting you in, right? And whether we decide to rest in that or not is our decision, but that doesn't take away the decision to stay in that space. How In social work, there's a question, we call it the miracle question, right? Of if you closed your eyes and went to sleep tonight and you woke up and all of the things that you hoped for came true, how would your life be different? My question to you is, if you close your eyes and open them again and you were in a space of resting in the reality that you're already saved, that rest is a reality we get to exist in, what would your life look like? How would that change how you approach your moments of anxiety? How would that change how you approach your moments of frustration with God? How would these two realities that we exist in, how would it be different if you chose to exist in what God knows to be true already? So today, we're going to do something different that we don't always do at One Place, but it's something we're going to do today. Is we know each of you are going through your own journeys, and we get dressed and we look nice for church, but we go back home to our realities. And sometimes the stuff we hear about at church stays in our seats as we go home. But we want to make sure that this time that we've spent in Daniel and the time that we've spent discussing today, that it leaves with you. That you are aware that we have a God that fights for us, like Michael stands up at the beginning of chapter, that we have a God who promises us assurance of our salvation, that no matter what happens in between, that we have a God at the beginning of the chapter that stands and fights, and a God who assures us of rest and salvation at the end, that can be your reality. So what we're going to invite you simply is, if you need prayer, if you need... like you want to leave here with the assurance that like this can be my life, and how sweet, whatever it is that you're imagining, like that can be it for me. The panelists we're going to pray for you. So if you want to come down and pray with us, we would love to invite you down. We're going to ask our awesome AV team to play some music. And if you want prayer, we're going to invite you to come down and pray with us. And we'll wait a few minutes. And if you're not necessarily wanting to come down, pray in your seats. But for those of you who do want to come down, we'll invite you to do that now.
And for those that are wanting individual prayer, we have some of those. We can do that, and then group prayer as well. So we invite you to come down if you want prayer.